Hello everyone, and welcome to another MSP Institute webinar. Today's topic is in our sales series, and we're covering how to engage customers in your customer relationship process. A very important topic because we find a lot of MSPs are not sitting down with their customers and going over the business-related materials on a regular basis with their customers and not proving the value of their worth to their customers from an MSP perspective. With me today is our Director of Sales, David Weeks. David will be taking us through this topic today. David, I don't want to steal any more of your thunder, please. It's all yours.
Thanks, Eris. Much appreciated. As Eris mentioned, this is an extremely important topic. You know, when you look at the valuation of an MSP's business, retention is everything. And in the eyes of an acquiring company, one of the first things that they're going to look at outside of contract revenue is the length of retention of customers that you have existing within your business. And so this is something that we have a regular conversation with our partners about in terms of how do we deliver that value on a regular basis and ensuring that your customers understand what it is that they're paying for. So we'll talk a little bit about the retention side, the fluidity of the relationship, delivery and valuation, the customer management process, some different ideas around account management where we're not just looking at delivering reports on a monthly basis via email, and really what goes into some of those strategic and risk assessment meetings. So really when we talk about that retention side, again, as I mentioned, that recurring contractual value obviously is extremely important in the portfolio of your business. But eliminating or reducing that churn is critical. And it's critical, again, in the eyes of an acquiring company or the overall valuation of your business. So understanding that as we manage these customers, who's really managing the customer? Who's managing the relationship? Is it your salesperson? Is it a technical person? Is it you as the business owner? None of them are the right or wrong answers. It's really just understanding what is your regular process that you follow in terms of delivering the value to your customers, and really understanding that, as I mentioned, emailing reports on a monthly basis doesn't really work anymore. You need to differentiate yourself out in the marketplace, and you need to provide additional value to your customers, especially with the advent of, new emerging technologies and needs, especially along things like the security and the data protection line. So when we think about the fluidity of this, really thinking about, your ongoing management and how do you continue to evolve that based on your customers' needs? The market obviously changes for you, technology changes, but what does that mean for your customers? How is their business moving forward? Are they growing? Are they shrinking? Are they looking for future new capabilities? Do they want to move to the cloud off of on-prem? Things along those lines. You need to have the ability to understand the direction of your customer's organization, and as a result, be that trust leader, that trusted advisor, and that thought leader. Helping them understand how you can improve their day-to-day interaction with technology. And what do I mean by that? Not how do they actually use the technology per se. Obviously, new technologies require a training component, but really, how does new technology help drive their revenue? How does it drive efficiency and productivity within their organization? So think about segmenting your customers and understanding, what is their average monthly spend with me? What is their strategic value? What are their overall needs? And that's what we call critical business services. Critical business services are the needs of a customer. That is how they stay in business. That's how they drive revenue. So looking at a holistic view of all of your customers will be beneficial for you to be able to drive different types of value and opportunity to them and be very strategic in the way that you're helping them plan. So you've got to align with their goals, objectives, and growth strategies. And when you do that, you become a part of the business, and you become a part as really as a partner to them. And with that, you're going to eventually be able to start to have different types of conversations longer term. Typically, what we see is service providers are talking within the contract period of things that they can do to help a customer. But really look outside of that. Be thinking 12 to 24 months out, 24 to 36 months out, because as you plan with a business as they plan their growth, you will naturally start to see longer term contracts because, again, you help develop the goals and the objectives that they're working towards. For those who are managing on a regular basis, whether it be a dedicated account manager, whether it be a salesperson, whether it be you, the business owner, or you have a VCIO or a VCTO, any of those types of positions, you need to have clear KPIs for them. So you need to understand, what do they do on a monthly basis? What do they do on a quarterly? What type of information do they deliver? Outside of just the standard reports that you might be able to pull from your RMM. What other types of planning sessions do they have? Who needs to be involved? What stakeholders from your customer's organization and what stakeholders from your organization? Because it can't always just be left to the account manager. Different people will need to be involved in those types of discussions. And have that regular interaction with them. At minimum, you should be talking to all of your customers at least once a month in a proactive fashion, not having them call into you where they might have an issue, because that's not the type of interaction that we're looking for. You proactively reaching out and having some form of conversation or check-in with them so they know that you're still looking at their account and that you guys always have consistent oversight over it. So when we think about the delivery method and business success, many of you have probably seen the maturity model and looking at the different ways that you support your customers. First is in a reactive model. Reactive model in that manual component is where we want to be looking to drive efficiencies. You want to be thinking about an a la carte strategy here, getting more entrenched into the business of your customer. The efficient side is that as we start to line up different types of business services, align with technology, things like managed AV, managed patch, etc., it will start to lend itself to moving them into an efficient level of management, what we would typically call a proactive program. And this is where you start to manage the whole environment and you're doing regular maintenance, and this is going to allow you to reduce the amount of reactive issues that occur, thereby creating a better user experience. And then at the top in the automated is where we're looking to streamline our service delivery as a service provider, which gives maximum benefit to the customer. So things like automation, self-healing, more advanced maintenance and management of the environment, because you're accepting more of the risk now as a service provider here, because you're taking them underneath a fully managed type program. So what are some of the key points to consider? A lot of people treat their customers like they're just a company, like they're another contract, and that's not the way to look at it. You need to treat your contracts as individuals, and you need to have that relationship with them. When you have a relationship with somebody and you can build on that relationship on an ongoing basis, they will be a lot more open. They will be a lot more trusting as well of the recommendations that you make. There's nothing wrong with overtime, and we hear it all the time with really good MSPs and with people who have managed customers for a long time, that they've become friends with their customers. Great place to end up, massive amount of stickiness. But you can never take that for granted, right? You always have to have that business and personal line in the sand, because you're going to have to sometimes make tough decisions for them. They may not like it and it may cost them money, but it's probably worth their while. We talked about the regular communication. Obviously, that's important. But that regular communication should come from a multitude of levels. It shouldn't just be the account manager. You as a business owner, if you're not involved in regular account management, you should be having regular communication as well from an ownership level to an ownership level of your customers, ensuring that they're getting the service and the support that they require. And then understanding the type of customer. If we've got somebody on a very low contract value, a lot of people feel that maybe I shouldn't spend a lot of time with them, but maybe you actually have a lot of opportunity with them. And maybe it's just a different way of looking at it. So you have to think about how it is that you want to manage that relationship on a regular basis. But nonetheless, a customer is a customer, and they all deserve regular interaction with you as an organization. If you're not interacting with them, they will go look elsewhere for services or support that they need, and that puts a potential for you to have a loss into your business. So have the process outlined and documented, and you've got to train all staff on it. If somebody's not available, for instance, your dedicated account manager, and something happens at a customer environment, and they call in and the account manager is not available, if you have a documented process to the staff, anybody should be able to jump in. They may not have the answer right away. That's absolutely fine. If they don't have the answer, at least they can tell them that they'll go source it. They can take some notes. They can update the account manager as required at a later date. So ensure that everybody's trained on the way that you want the organization to interact with your customers. So when we think about a customer management process and the way that you should be overlooking the day-to-day activity across a customer, a lot of that's going to be done by your NOC or your help desk. They're going to have the most interaction, whether it be behind the scenes or whether that be interacting with a customer over a remote control session or on the phone or chat. But you've got to think about a process of how you want to manage a customer, and we really look at it on a multi-step approach. Number one is when you take on a new customer, you all do an assessment. When you do that assessment and you win the business, you then onboard the customer. When you onboard the customer, you set up the monitoring to be particular to the different areas of the network that you're managing and the needs and the requirements of the business. So for sure, critical applications and different devices, you might want to have an enhanced monitoring protocol on. Then you want to set up your management. Your management is your regular maintenance, trying to mitigate any potential issues or downtime or security incidents within the environment. And then from there, you've got to think, how do I mitigate? Because mitigation will always happen. Just because you're doing proper monitoring and management doesn't mean that there won't be an issue that won't occur. But when it does, how do I expedite my mean time to resolution to benefit my customer? And from there, we provide reports and empirical evidence on a regular basis back to the customer. This is not our account management process, but we provide reports to show them that the job was done and it was resolved. So this is where most people, and this is typical to how a service provider will manage a customer. However, on day 31 or the first day of the next month, we should be starting back over. We should be reassessing the environment. Is there anything that maybe we've missed, or is there anything that we could add to our services? For instance, maybe I didn't initially take on their data backup and management. They're using a third-party solution. I know it has a high failure rate. I want to move them onto my backup. We do the assessment. We show them the info. They agree. We onboard the backup. I now set up my monitoring, and I ensure that I'm monitoring those backups on a regular basis and that we're having successful backups on the schedule that was defined for the customer. I set up my regular management. Maybe that's monthly test restores. I'm going to check the integrity of the data, and I'm going to ensure that if there's any problems that I mitigate that and that moving forward on regular backups that we don't have issues. And with that, I'm going to report back to the customer. I'm going to let them know that we've migrated them over. They're now on our backup solution. Everything's working well. Here's some empirical evidence showing successful backups, and that, you know what, we have a lot of confidence in this new solution. We now hit the first day of the next month, we reassess. And so there may not always be new stuff to onboard, but you're probably always going to be tweaking your monitoring and your management and understanding areas of mitigation that you can improve on, and again, reporting back to the customer on what it is that you've done. This is what we call cost justification versus monthly spend. That's what a business owner's looking for. If we're just providing the odd report by email once a month or once a quarter, there's going to be a point in time, and it's usually fairly quick after the engagement starts, that the decision makers that you're sending that to stop looking at your reports. Things seem to work, things seem to be moving along fairly well, but then there's another inception point in the relationship where they think, what am I paying for? And that's when they start to make calls. And the calls are not to you first, unfortunately, it's to your competitors, because they're looking for somebody to justify the spend that they're providing you on a monthly basis. So how do we add value into the way that we manage a customer relationship? As I mentioned, a lot of people simply just send reports at the end of the month. I'll be pretty blunt here, that type of account management is dead. If you're doing that today, you're falling far behind the market, and your competitors are going to come in and just in the type of account management engagement that they have through CIO and CTO type services, they're going to knock you out of that environment pretty quickly. So thinking about the role that you can play as a chief information officer, a chief technology officer, or even a chief security officer can bring a massive amount of value to the ongoing management and the relationship that you have with a customer. Most organizations don't know what they don't know. And so they're going to be looking to you to define areas that they should be thinking about for improvement. that can help them run more efficiently, that can help streamline their business, that can help them maybe find cost savings or increase the productivity or the revenue per hour of an employee. Service providers can get that deep, because when we think about the biggest cost to most businesses, it's human capital, it's the payroll side. But if their second biggest cost is typically technology, you've got to play the two hand in hand. And so that gives you a really good point to justify expenditures or changes in the business by relating everything down to a human resource cost, or to an overall strategic business goal or change, or even to the valuation of their business. So you've got to be very specific in your recommendations, and you've got to align that to potential risk that they have if they don't make the move. And again, it doesn't mean that they have to make a massive change in their business today. You might be planning with them 6 or 12 months out. It might be that you have to do a project, and the customer indicates to you that a $20,000 project fee is not feasible in the next 12 months. They can't afford a capital like that where they're going to cut you a check plus buy $15,000 or $20,000 in infrastructure to go up in the cloud. That's fair. That doesn't mean that you can't plan it over a greater amount of time, or maybe bundle the labor component of the project fee into your monthly services fee and help them break out that cost. There's no reason that you can't finance that. You're already profitable in your contract, so therefore you're just going to add in some additional monthly services fees to help cover off a labor component of something that needs to change within the business. So CIO and CTO services are extremely important, and with that, you're always thinking about, if we don't make this change or if we don't align to some type of requirement, here is the risk that is a potential to you. So you have to have the right relationships. We might have met and signed the deal with an office manager, but they're probably not making a lot of the strategic decisions for an organization. So we've got to understand who's the CEO, the president, the managing director, who's in a VP level, maybe who's in a senior management level that help drive some of those changes. So ensure that you have those proper relationships and ensure that you have them early on. And when you set those business goals with the stakeholders, you're going to get a much better sense of their expectations of the service that you're delivering on a daily basis to them, because they're going to be very clear on what it is that they require from you. And with that, you can be looking at things like compliance, regulatory, good governance reviews. You've got to constantly be reviewing a risk assessment and a plan with them. And the risk assessment could be security focused. It could be generalities in terms of their environment or their growth as a business. That's fine. And a risk assessment doesn't have to be overly complex. You could be looking at some particular areas of how they do business and ranking them 0 to 10. 10 being a very high risk, 0 being virtually no risk. Now, typically, nobody will ever be at a 0, but if you get them in a 1 to 2 range, they'll be comfortable. And again, there's nothing wrong with just having that on an Excel spreadsheet and justifying your findings. Because remember that on a daily basis of your monitoring and management of an environment, you are pulling a massive amount of data analytics from that environment that you can use to justify change in what that business is doing. So as you deliver that information, you've got to be able to correlate the two. From our daily management, our weekly, and our monthly management, what we're finding is A, B, and C. And as a result, the market is changing, and your A, B, and C will become archaic. So we need to look at D, E, and F. And that's going to be the change that we're going to implement in your business, and here are the enhancements, but here's the benefit to all of you. Then you're going to work with them on how you're going to provide the change management on that. We just can't walk in and take 50 users offline and put in a whole new application. We've got to stagger that approach. We've got to know what works within their business model. We've got to understand that if, for instance, it's an accountant and it's tax season, it's probably not a good time to launch a new application or do a project. And so we figure out the right times with the business through change management to ensure that there's minimal disruption on both sides, both for your customer and both for you as a service provider. Then you highlight all of those potential business outcomes. You'll probably have to do a return on investment on some of the areas that you're recommending. And then your process continues to educate the customer and working towards different goals and objectives, because those will evolve with each business that you deal with. So similar to our process where we followed the assessment through to the reporting, we follow an almost similar process in our CIO and CTO type meetings, where we're taking them through a cyclical approach that we do on a regular basis. Typically, these will happen on a quarterly basis. Okay, you don't need to be doing these every month. Sometimes they may only want them twice a year, dependent on the organization and the size of them. But you can work that out with the different people that you deal with to ensure the cadence that works best for them. So really, in thinking about the way that you need to think about your business moving forward, it's all about you staying ahead of the curve. Your customers don't have time to understand how their business should evolve with technology. That's the reason that they hired you on. And so you need to think about all the areas you can stay ahead of the curve. So what are the potential disruptors to your customer's business? That could be hardware related, infrastructure related, service and support application related. It could be general market factors. You could be in depth into a specific vertical and understand changes coming in the medical or the financial space as it relates to things like compliance or regulatory acts, and you want to stay ahead of that with your customers. Security and risk, massive components of any service provider's business today. I believe that all of your customers today just believe that you're their security provider. So as a result, you need to be making the recommendations on enhanced security. If you're not doing it and you haven't made the recommendations and some form of breach happens, you are going to churn that customer. It's one of the biggest reasons that we see today that MSPs lose business is whether they made a recommendation or not, they weren't forceful enough or did not protect themselves in terms of the recommendation, and a customer refused it, and yet the breach occurred and they were blamed. Because they're naturally going to blame their service provider. They don't want to say that they're at fault. So proper documentation can help mitigate against that risk. Appreciate that consumers are becoming more educated. So walking out today into the market and selling managed services, I would argue has probably lost a little bit of luster. Why? 5 years ago, we were educating everybody on what is managed services. Today, they know what managed services is. They understand, for the most part, the general value around it. Whether or not they want to pay for it, different question. But what you need to be able to do is think about the fact that they're more educated. And maybe they're more educated today on managed services, but they're not quite educated on security or virtualization and moving to the cloud and into SaaS-based applications. That could be your foothold into a customer or into a prospect. And that can be stuff that you can utilize to generate value to them on a regular basis and how they evolve their business. So as you're going to do this and as you're going to stay ahead of the curve, you need to ensure that as you add these different types of services in, that you're able to continue to productize your offerings, because they've got to be very easy to consume for your customers. They've got to understand the value in them, and they have to have business transposed on the back end so that they understand the overall value. Now, internally on your protection, you need to ensure that you have proper scopes of work. If not, your engineering and your reactive or help or service desk teams are going to be consistently over-servicing customers or servicing areas that they shouldn't be. That is going to affect your long-range planning with customers. That is going to affect the expectation of your customer. So you need to ensure that we have proper management within those components and that SOW is followed on a regular basis. Now, when you implement all these different processes and procedures and you've got regular tracking and regular management, regular meetings with your customers, you need to ensure that it's working. So one of the most important things is to track customer satisfaction. This is not something that should necessarily be done during your account management meetings or your VCO or VCIO or CTO or CSO type meetings. You can't really do a customer satisfaction survey face-to-face. You can, but most people, they don't want to tell you the truth face-to-face, in all honesty. They're going to want to do it online. Send them an email, send them a quick survey, and allow them to give you some of that feedback. Maybe even some of those surveys to your customers are anonymous, so it forces you as an organization to improve across all of your customers and not just one. But it's okay as well to understand their concerns, and people feel a little bit better behind email giving those concerns. So don't be scared to ask. When you do the customer satisfaction surveys, everything that you're doing well, you're going to continue to do. That's not really what we're looking for. We're looking for the bad, because the bad we can improve on, and the bad, when we mitigate it, will mitigate potential churn of customers within our business. So I hope everybody found that helpful today. I think really the key takeaway from this is just understanding, do you have a set process today in how you manage your customer relationships? And if you somewhat do, or you feel that you do, continually be looking at it and understand what works for your customers and what doesn't, and what works for you as an organization, and again, what doesn't work for you as well. Thank you very much for your time today.